Peace, 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 everybody. And welcome back to another episode of everything all right? Alright. Peace, 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 everybody. I was just making sure everything is right. And welcome back to another episode of Focus Lens Podcast, where truth and lies come into focus. Or should I say, where truth and facts come into focus. Welcome back, everybody. Hope everybody having a good leading into the holidays. Everything's good. I hope everything's good with everybody else. But welcome back, man. If you like the podcast, like, subscribe, go to my podcast, Rational Lens Podcast, YouTube. Y'all know y'all can get me here on Facebook. I'm trying to build up this channel, you understand? And give people the information and, open up some eyes and connect with some good people who also have knowledge and understanding themselves of the esoteric knowledge. Today I'm going to be talking about Melchizedek. We're going to be talking about the 24 elders. So we're going to get into angelology. Talking about different type of angels, talking about different planes of existence. We're going to get a full understanding of who Melchizedek is, his position in the spiritual realm, and what's his position over those chosen people whose eyes are opening up, who's coming to oneness with themselves and the Most High. Melchizedek plays a real important part of that because Melchizedek is the archangel. He's also the warring angel of the Most High. The Order of Melchizedek, which is a intergalactical spiritual fraternity, which a lot of spiritual masters who master knowledge itself or master self become a part of. Melchizedek is also the controller in charge of this galaxy, what we call the Milky Way, and all the planet and all the stars and solar systems that's in it. It's Melchizedek, through the Most High, who has in charge of this realm, what we call the Milky Way. You understand? In this part of the universe, and keeping up the agenda of the Most High with the chosen people that's in this part of the galaxy and universe, which we call our Milky Way. I'm going to be reading from two books today. Malachi Z. York, the Holy Tablets, and I'm going to be reading from the Truth Book, or what they call Urantia, which is another good book that everybody should get, especially if you read the Bible. Urantia is a real good book. It's also called the Truth Book. The reason why I like it, because it adds on to the Bible and to those religious books that they don't tell us about. There's parts in the Urantia that you're not going to see in the Bible. It's like added on. It like fills in the blanks of the Bible, because we know that the Bible has been reformed and changed and edited by those who try to keep the truth from not coming out. So the Urantia book, or the Truth Book, is a real good book because it gives you a wider scope of the Bible. So I'm going to be reading from that. I'm going to be reading from the Holy Tablets, and I also wrote some notes of myself. So I'm going to be dabbling around, reading from my notes, reading from the Urantia book, reading from the Holy Tablets, and I'm going to try to put all this together for you to give you our understanding who is Melchizedek, his position, his place in the spiritual realm, his position in this part of the universe and galaxy. What is the agenda of Melchizedek, which is the agenda of the Most High. So I hope y'all get something from it. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about I'm going to read from the Holy Tablets. I'm going to read the first chapter. Let me bring this up. And I know a lot of people might not like Malachi York, but he's human just like everybody else. But the man have done a lot for our people. He have opened up the eyes spiritually of a lot of our people on this planet. So we got to give him his props. You know what I'm saying? We got to respect him because he's a part of us. We are part of him. And he have did his job to try to enlighten and make a better place for his peoples. You understand? So I think his information is real valid. I know everybody don't agree, but some things are on point that he said. We have a whole lot of teachers, and Malachi York is one of them, you know. So let me bring this up. All right, here we go. So I'm reading from chapter 1. Chapter 1 from the Holy Tablet. If you ain't got the Holy Tablet, get it. It's a very informal book. A lot of information that you can research for yourself. It'll definitely open your eyes and probably fill in a lot of gaps of things that you didn't know about. Written by Malachi Z. York. And I'm reading from the first chapter, which is called Creation, right? Tablet 1, the epic of creation and before. So he's going to be talking about creation and before creation. You understand? And the reason why I want to read from this part, because it's real important of what I'm getting into. Especially when we talk about spiritual beings or angelic beings. We need to know their part in creation and before creation. So this information here is going to tell you about before things was even into existence. So it says, "My children, allow me to speak with you, for it is that time again, every 25,000 years, for the renewal of your way of life, which is Nuwapu." So when he talks about the renewal every 25 years, we know that we go through an equinox cycle. You understand? That equinox cycle is 24,000 years. It's broken up into 4 sectors. You have 2 sun cycles and you have 2 moon cycles. Each cycle is 7,000 years. Some say 6,000 years, but it's really 7 because that 1,000 year, that period of nothingness or that point of 0, because everything starts from 0. You understand? 0 is not really a number. It's a state of being. It symbolizes the cipher, 360 degrees, which symbolizes life. 180, 180. That 180 is positive and negative. And when we're dealing with positive and negative, we know we're dealing with electromagnetism. The magnetism is the positive side, and the electro or electricity is the negative side. This is where you get your yin and your yang, your male and female, man and woman, positive and negative. You understand? And in between is what they call the jinn. You understand? That's the spiritual aspect that keeps these 2 polarities together. You understand? Positive and negative, good and bad, heaven and hell. In between is what you call nothingness, or what we'll call ether. You understand? We know there's different levels of ether, 1 to 9. 9 ether is what consists of all the gases in the universe that created the universe, and 9 being the highest number that there is. You understand? There's no number past 9. 9 symbolize to renew, rebirth, things of that nature. You understand? 9 also taps in with the sun. 9 ether. 9 ether connects with the sun. The sun is the highest vibration and frequency in this realm of consciousness. And we know who are the sun beings. The sun beings are your big nose, big lips, dark melanated skin, woolly haired beings. These are the beings of the sun. So we're talking about melanin. And melanin is the essence of creation. Melanin is black. Melanin is space. Melanin is ether. Also, they call it black light. It's the spirit that holds everything together. You understand? So when we're talking about non-ether, this is what we're talking about, those gases that consist of all the gases in the universe that created everything that you see. So that's what the sun represents. The sun is a burning gas of ether, 1 to 9. You understand? Non-ether consists of those melanated beings who were the first primary beings in creation, because those are your melanated beings. Remember, melanin is the essence of all things. Melanin is black. Melanin is space, ether. You understand? It's what keeps the physical and spiritual together. There's many names for it, what they call ether scientifically. They call it tachyon energy. Some spiritual organizations like that deal with yoga, they call it prana. What they call that? Ogun energy. Ogun energy is another aspect of saying prana energy, ether, tachyon energy. These are the different names for ether. You understand? And we know that ether is the plasmic or the spiritual aspect of things. It's where light comes into existence. So the electromagnetic energy field comes from out of the plasma, out of the ether. So you have potential ether and you have absolute ether, which is pure ether, which is pure space, pure blackness. You understand? Some talk about the triple darkness that things came from out of, before the light, before time, before law, before anything existed. Ether, dark blackness, triple blackness. You understand? So when he talk about the 24 cycle period, this is what he's talking about, a renewed period. Every 24,000 years, our history is renewed. And that equinox cycle is broken down into 4 cycles, 2 moon cycles, 2 sun cycles. And when we're in the sun cycle, it's the rising of our consciousness. And when we're in the moon cycle, it's a downgrade of our consciousness. You understand? So we fluctuate up and down from being woke to going to sleep, being awoke, being asleep. You understand? And each cycle is 6,000 years. But like I told you, it's really 7. So we have four sevens, which is really 28. You understand? Because that 1,000 period of rest, there's a point of rest, of nothingness. So when things restart over again, it always have to go back to nothingness or 0. You understand? And then resets and then starts all over again. Goes back to 0, resets, come back into existence again. So that's the cycle of how life goes. It's called our equinox cycle, and every 24,000 years, which is really 28,000 years, because 7, which is the number of completion and perfection, and 28, you understand, which is wisdom, duality, and 8, which is in the supreme mathematics, is to build and destroy. When you build something, you have to destroy something. So things go from being built to back to being destroyed, to being built, back to being destroyed. So when we're dealing with 8, that's what we're dealing with, building and destroying. You understand? And 8 is also, when you look at the 8, it's 2 circles. One cipher is life. One cycle is physical. The other cycle is spiritual. 360, which is 720, which is the whole thing of spirit and physical knowledge. You understand what I'm saying? So when he's talking about the 24 period cycle, that's what he's talking about. And that's when things set, die, and reset to come back into existence again. Right? So I'm going to say it again. It says, "My children, allow me to speak with you, for it is that time again." So we're dealing with time. The equinox cycle is dealing with time. And we know time is an illusion. Time and space is really one. When you're dealing with time on a quantum level, which is really the spiritual level, space-time merges as one. That's why they call it space-time in quantum physics, because everything moves to the speed of light according in that realm of what we call quantum realm or the spiritual realm. You understand? And it moves so fast that we can't keep track of time. So there's a point where time and space merges as one, if y'all understand. You understand? So space-time exists on a quantum level. So when we're talking about cycles, we're talking about time. Those cycles go around in a circle. We're not moving in a straight linear path. This is the lie that they told us. We're really moving in a circle. You understand? The whole solar system and the universe is moving in a circle. You understand? And so that's a cycle, a circle, which is really 28,000 years, which is broken down into 7, 7, 7, 7, 2 moon cycles, 2 sun cycles. You understand? And you have an equinox, and then you have a universal equinox. You understand? So when we're talking about cycles, that's what he's talking about. You understand? So he says, "O my children, allow me to speak with you, for it is that time again, every 25,000 years." It's really 28, because there's 4 cycles. Each cycle is really 7,000 years. That 1,000 years from that 7 is a rest period or a reset period where everything goes back to nothingness or zero, which we call space, nothingness, which is actually something. That nothing is actually something that exists in the pure form of what they call ether, or what they call prana, or what they call tachyon. These are the different names for ether. Right? It says, "For the renewal of your way of life, which is Nuwapu." Nuwapu is the way of logic and reasoning. That's all it is, because the universe is logic. Everything in the universe deals with logic. And how do we know that? Because there's law and order, and it's all based on mathematics. You understand? That means that whatever divine intelligence that's creating all of this, it's doing it in a logical way. It thinks in a logical way of existence. You understand? This is what we call Nuwapu. Nuwapu is just a way of thinking, right knowledge, right wisdom, right understanding. You understand? Which leads to sound, right reasoning. When you're dealing with reasoning, you're dealing with the mind. You're dealing with logic, the way people think. You understand? And that's where we're messed up at. We don't think according to logic or reasoning, which is something we have to learn how to do, because the whole universe and the law of the universe is based on sound reasoning. You understand? Which the Nuwapians call Nuwapu. It says, "Let me speak with you of the beginning of life, before and after knowledge, bestow upon you of your very own creation, and the making of this planet you call Earth, and the many other planets of which you have no knowledge of. Your soul, that is the emotional you, is about to embark upon a journey through time and space." So we journey through time and space. Only in the physical realm, time and space is separate and fragmented. In the quantum realm or in the spiritual realm, space is one. That's why they call it space-time. And space-time is an interval, because time is made up of intervals. You understand? Those intervals are what we call interdimension or interspace, that you can travel through to go to other parts of space. So everything is based on an interval. Time moves on intervals from point A to point B to point C. There's an interval to get there. You understand? That's you traveling interdimensionally in space. You understand? So, or what they call hyperspace. You understand? So that's what that is. Right? It says, your soul, that is the emotional you, is about to embark upon a journey through space and time within existence, through a time not yet encountered by the human beast and the human being, the children of the Elohim, the human, which the word human, you get the word hu, which means life force or will. You understand? Human. You understand? Man dealing with mind, because the word mind, man comes from the word man. The word man comes from the word mind. In Hinduism, they call it Manus. Manus means mind. M-A-N-U-S. You understand? This is where they get man from, because man is a mind. Man creates from his mind. Wherever he think of, that's what he becomes. He creates everything from the mind. So man is a mind. You understand? A woman is her mind. You understand? So these things that we call the man is mind, and everything comes from out of the mind. Ether is what they call mind, pure mind. So when we talk about space, you're talking about the pure mind. You understand? That brought everything into existence. So when we talk about human is the creative force of the mind. You understand? And it also comes from the word im or mammy. Mammy is mother. You understand? One of the Anunnaki, Nehursag, her name was Mammy Mitu. Nehursag, she was the one that helped Enki create human beings. She was the mother of human beings. So that's where we get the word mammy or mommy from. You understand? The feminine principality. Matter of fact, let me bring that up. So y'all know who Mammy or Nehursag, who is the mother principality who gave birth to human beings or helped create human beings. She was one of the Anunnaki, who was the daughter of Anu. You understand? And she was the one that worked with Enki to create human beings. It says Nehursag or Nema or Damgal Nuna. These are two of the different names she also go by. Is a major Sumerian mother goddess, symbolizing the mountains, fertility, and creation. Known as the Lady of the Mountain, and a key figure in creating gods and humans. Y'all hear that? I'm going to read it again. It says, Nehursag, or Nema, or Damgal Nuna, is a major Sumerian mother goddess, symbolizing the mountains, fertility, and creation, known as the Lady of the Mountain, and a key figure in creating gods and humans, often depicted with animals or a lion cub, associated with life, birth, and nurturing, but also capable of bringing famine. So one of the symbols that you might see of Nehursag is her carrying a lion cub. That's one of the glyphs that you will see of her in the Sumerian tablets. You'll see her carrying a lion cub, but she symbolizes life, birth, and nurturing, and is capable of bringing famine, right? It says, key aspect, the name and meaning, Lady of the Sacred Mountain. So Nehursag means Lady of the Sacred Mountain, reflecting her connection to wild landscapes and earth. Number 2, her role, the mother goddess, creator of life, God and humans, midwife, goddess of fertility, mountains, and nurturing. Number 3, associations, wild animals, deer, ibex, and stony ground, life-giving milk, and rulers. Number 4, other names, Nema, Damgal Nuna, Dingirmaka, Aruru, and Nintur. These are the different names for the mother or the mother goddess or Mami, who was the one that created human beings and she created the gods, right? It says number 5, family. Often a consort to Enki, the god of wisdom, but also linked to Shunpei. So Enki and Nehursag was husband and wife. They also were brother and sister. This is how the Anunnakis kept things genetically into the family. They married inside the family to keep the blood pure and to keep the genealogy records on track. So Nehursag and Enki were also husband and wife, and they also were brother and sister. And their father was Anu, who was the king of the Anunnakis, or king of the gods, or ruler of the universe. You understand? And Nehursag, she was the mother goddess. She was the one that created humans and the gods. Right? Number 6, the mythology. She plays a vital role in creating world and humanity, particularly in myth involving Enki and the Garden of Dilmun. So when we talk about the Garden of Dilmun, a lot of people don't know there was more than just one garden. Any place the gods exist and put their mark on, that place became a garden. That place became a high vibratorial frequency of the god itself. You understand? So wherever these gods landed their foot at on earth, it became a state of godliness or a God state of consciousness. You understand? So that means that it was perfect and complete, and it was on the God vibration. You understand? So Dilmun is one of the Garden of Eden. You had Dilmun. You also had Mesopotamia, which also was one of the Gardens of Eden. The Garden of Eden that they talk about in the Bible is the second Garden of Eden that they talk about, because it was between the Tigris and Euphrates River and the White and Blue Nile, which was in the east. They was talking about Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia is the cradle of civilization. And it's you had advanced civilizations like Acadia, Sumeria, Babylon, Assyria. These advanced civilizations where the Anunnakis were at and created, they created life and civilization there. You understand? These were your advanced civilizations because of where the Anunnakis landed and set up at. You understand? So when we talk about the cradle of civilization, which is ancient Sumeria, ancient Acadia, ancient Babylonia, ancient Assyria, ancient Egyptian or ancient Egypt, this is where the Anunnakis set up at. And where they set up at, they always set up at an advanced vortex point or sphere of existence. And they took that existence or that sphere of existence and they advanced it. You understand? So that's why Egypt was advanced. That's why Acadia was advanced. That's why Sumeria was advanced. Babylonian was advanced. And Assyria. Even over here in the Americas, certain vortex points where you have your pyramids also. A lot of pyramids are in these areas that I just named, like Egypt, like Acadia, Sumeria, Babylon, Assyria. And like I said, even over here in North America, you also have pyramids set up in a particular place where there's a lot of energy. You understand? So Dilmun was one of the gardens. Mesopotamia was one of the gardens. And then you also had a spiritual garden that was above in the spiritual realm. You understand? So you had 3 gardens. The original garden was in the spiritual realm, and then it came on, then they replicated that garden that was in the spiritual realm on earth, which was Dilmun and Mesopotamia, which is known as the cradle of civilization, Sumeria, Egypt, you understand, Babylonian, Acadia, so forth. Her symbols, depiction of the goddess, the horn headdress, the tiara skirt, sometimes with the bow case or a Macon baton, a mace or a baton, often with a lion cub on a leash. So like I tell you, every time you see the mother, mammy, or Nehursag, they always show her with the lion cub. You understand? Holding the baton or the mace, which symbolizes royalty. Number 2, symbolizing, her symbol also is the omega symbol. So when you see the omega symbol, it goes like this, it comes around. That symbol of the omega symbol is the symbol of Nehursag. You understand? And it represents the reproduction organ. You understand? So when we, omega, which is negative, and we know that the negative polarity is the woman. The positive polarity is the man, the yin and yang. You understand? So when you see the omega symbol is the symbol of the reproduction organ, which symbolizes for Nehursag, because she was the mother who created the gods and humanity with her husband Enki in the garden they called Dilmun, which was one of the gardens. There were 3 gardens, like I told you. The first one created in heaven, and then they replicated those same garden-like environments here on earth. So let's go back to reading from the Holy Tablet. Give me one minute for this to come up. Right? So it says, your soul, that is the emotional you, is about to embark upon a journey through time and space within existence, through a time not yet encountered by the human beast and the human being, the children of the Elohim. Right? The human beings are the children of the Elohim, and you have a human-like beast man. You understand? It's dealing with evolution and Darwin, the evolvement from apes and all that other stuff. That would be your human beast that exists right here on the planet with human beings. You understand? The human beings are the children of the Elohim, which is the angelic host. The word Elo means these beings, which is the angelic hosts that do the will of the Most High. These are angels of light. You understand? It says the children of the Elohim, the human, which you get the word hu, which means creative force of will, and meme, also mammy, meaning deity of birth, because Nehursag is the goddess of birth, right? Which is another name for Mother Ninti, who gave birth to mortals. Ninti is another name for Nehursag. Like I told you, she was the one that created the gods and human beings with her husband Enki. Right? The human beings of Hu, creative force of will, and main, from the Latin spirit of the dead, which the confound of this holy tablet you shall embark upon, with such knowledge which has never before been. Give me 1 minute. Because I couldn't get to the original site, I gotta wait until this thing load up. So it takes some time. So I hope y'all understanding who Ninti is and her husband Enki. They came together and they created the gods and they created humans. You understand? The humans are the creation of the Elohim. They're the children of the Elohim, which are your angelic beings. You understand? And you also have your beast man or your beast human, which they call Bethamah. The Bethamah means beast. It also means Leviathan, which is the symbol of the serpent or the snake, which is one of Satan's sins, which means envy. Envy is one of Satan's deadly sins. You understand? You got 7 deadly sins. One of them is envy, which symbolizes Leviathan. Leviathan is the serpent, which symbolizes the beast in the water that causes chaos and mayhem. So that means that serpent that causes chaos and mayhem deals with the lunar frequency, you understand, which is chaos, mayhem, and destruction and death, which relates with the moon, because the moon symbolizes lunar, or when you get the word lunatic, which your psyche, you understand, your soul can go crazy into a state of chaos, mayhem, and destruction and death. So when you hear Leviathan, which is one of the 7 deadly sins, envy, you understand, that Leviathan is the beast that caused chaos and mayhem. And that beast exists in human form on this planet. You understand? So that beast that's under Leviathan, which is the symbol of the moon, lunacy, chaos, mayhem, and destruction, you understand? Those are the children of Satan. Those are the children that are under control and guidance of Satan. They cause chaos, mayhem, and destruction. This is the beast. The beast also symbolizes uncivilized. Somebody that's uncivilized, always causing chaos, mayhem, and destruction and death. They are according to the vibration of the moon, which psychologically deals with being insane, psychopathic, lunacy, you understand? Which goes against the natural laws of nature, which causes chaos, mayhem, and destruction. You understand? So when he talk about the beast man, that's what he's talking about. Right? So let me continue on reading. So it says, when in the confine of this holy tablet, you shall embark upon such knowledge which has never before made so clear as this for you by any. Let me start by telling you about the beings that exist trillions of Earth years ago before the Precambrian period. So he's going into explaining existence trillions of years of Earth years ago before the Precambrian period. So when we talk about the Precambrian period is a period in Earth's evolution, as in Earth evolution, when life form started to diversify itself. You understand? So during that period when life started to diversify itself, or life forms or creatures started to diversify itself, they call that the Precambrian explosion. You understand? The Precambrian explosion is a period in Earth's evolution when creatures started to started to diversify itself in the waters. Remember, Earth was an all-water planet. And inside that water during the Precambrian period and during the Precambrian explosion, life forms started to diversify in the water. And this is how you get all your different creatures that exist inside of the water. You understand? They call that the Precambrian period, right? It says the Precambrian is a Earth early longest span of time from its formation 4 billion years ago until the start of the Cambrian period 541 million years ago, covered nearly 90% of the Earth history and encompasses the Hadean, Archean, and Proterozoic era, eons, which life emerged from simple bacteria to complex cellular form. So during the Precambrian period, which is a part in Earth's evolution, when life started to diversify, or when creatures started to diversify in the waters of what we call Mother Earth, these creatures evolved from simple bacteria, or what they call single cell organisms. These single cell organisms is what you call your prokaryotic cells. Your prokaryotic cells are your single cell organisms who don't have a fully formed nucleus. You understand? They were single cell organisms. They were called prokaryotic cells. These prokaryotic cells didn't have a nucleus form. You understand? And so from those single cell organisms that came together and started to interact with each other, form some type of intelligent organism or arrangement with each other, then this is where you get your multicellular forms. So you have your single cell organisms, which are your prekaryotic cells, and your prokaryotic cells are cells that don't have a nucleus structure, if you know anything about cells. You understand? And that was during your they were called metazoans. No, they wasn't called metazoans. They were called protozoic cells. Your single cell organisms we call your protozoic cells. All right, let me bring this up so I can tell this to y'all, right? So your single cell organisms, which were your prokaryotic cells, they diversified microscopic organisms, most grouped as protists, that had complex cells with a nucleus and organelles. Unlike bacteria, they include algae, protozoas, which are amoebas, parameciums, slime mold, and yeast, functioning as photosynthesis. Algae consume a protozoa or decomposer, playing a crucial role in the economic system. So you had your single cell organisms, which were your prokaryotics. Your prokaryotics became your multicellular, you understand, which were your metazoans. Your single cell organisms, which were your prokaryotic cells, were called your protozoas. You understand? And from your protozoas, you got your amoebas and your parameciums. Your amoebas were single cell organisms that didn't have no type of shape. And they consumed, they moved on these, what they call, these pods. And they would consume things into their self. That's how they ate things. Let me give y'all that so y'all can understand what I'm talking about. So your amoebas were your single cell organisms. Right? Amoebas were your single cell microorganisms known for its ability to change shape by extending temporary force feet called pseudopods. You understand? So your amoebas were your single cell microorganisms who had ability to change shape, shift shape, which is a reptilian characteristic. This is where you get the shape-shifting reptilians from. Your amoebas existed inside of the waters. They were able to shape-shift, and they moved on these force feet that they call pseudopods. You understand? They were parasitic single cell organisms that existed in the waters, and they were able to shape-shift. It says amoebas use pseudopod force feet for movement and feeding, found in diverse environments like water and the soil. And while most are harmless, some can cause serious infections like brain-eating amoebas, which infect through the nose. So like I told you, you have positive amoebas, and then you have brain-eating amoebas that enter through the nose. You understand? And these single cell microorganisms had the ability to change shape, and they extended temporary force feet, which they call pseudopods. These were your first protozoas that were inside of the water during the Precambrian period, which they had something called the Precambrian explosion, when these single cell organisms started to diversify themselves inside the water. And then you had your eukaryotes or your eukaryotics, who were your multicellular organisms, which were known as metazoans. So you had your protozoans and you had your metazoans. You understand? But your amoebas were your protozoans, your first single-cell organisms to diversify inside of the waters of Mother Earth. They were able to shapeshift, and they used force feet, which they call pseudopods, and they existed in water and soil environments. And you have positive ones and you have negative ones who can affect the brain, which they call brain-eating amoebas that enter through the nose. You understand? And you also had your parameciums. Your parameciums were another group of single-cell organisms which were called protozoas. Let me explain what a paramecium is. So your parameciums are your eukaryotic, unicellular, widespread in freshwater and marine environments. Parameciums are often abundant in stagnant basins and ponds. Because some species are really cultivated and easily induced to conjugate and divide, they have been widely used in classrooms and laboratories to study biological process. Paramecium species are commonly studied as model organisms of the ciliate group and have been categorized as the white rats of the phylum Ciliphora, right? So you had your amoebas, you had your parameciums. These are your single-cell organisms. They existed inside the water, ponds. They were watertight, aquatic, single-cell organisms. You understand? And they were also called protozoas. You also had your algae, which are form of plants, which deal with photosynthesis. You understand? But how those prokaryotic cells manifested into eukaryotic cells, what happened was a protozoa consumed a single cell organism, and instead of digesting it, that algae that protozoa ate for food became part of its nucleus. This is where we get the mitochondria energy, which is in the nucleus of the cell of cellular beings. You understand? So this is how your eukaryotic cells were created from prokaryotic cells, because they started to interact with each other, and some were used for food by others. And in this case, your protozoas or your algae consumed the protozoa. Instead of digesting it, it made it part of its system, which is the nucleus system that we see today. You understand? And this is why a cell has a nucleus. And those cells that have a nucleus we call eukaryotic cells. You understand? So getting back to the Precambrian period and the Precambrian explosion, when creatures started to diversify on the planet at the time when Earth was just water. This is the reason why you got the different diversity of sea creatures or aquatic beings inside of our waters. This happened during the Precambrian explosion and the Precambrian period, which was broken up into different periods. You had your Hadean period, your Archean period, and your Proterozoic era, where life emerged from simple bacteria to complex multicellular forms, setting the stage for the Cambrian explosion of diversity. All right? So you had the Precambrian period, which started 4.6 billion years ago, and then the Cambrian period that was 541 million years ago. The Cambrian period is the explosion when things started to diverse themselves, when these single cell organisms started to evolve into multicellular organisms, which we call eukaryotics. So I hope y'all understand that. So let me get back to reading what I was reading. So this was before. We're talking about creation, and we're talking about before creation. You understand? Give me 1 minute. I'm just trying. This thing is slow when it try to download up. Right? So when it talks about the Precambrian period, it's talking about trillions. But like it said right here, so let me start by telling you about the beings that existed trillions of Earth years ago before the Cambrian period. So the Cambrian period started 4.6 billion years ago, right? And this is when during the period when your single cell organisms existed, and then you had 541 million years ago when the Cambrian explosion happened and creation and life forms started to diversify on the planet. But he's talking about trillions of years ago before that, before the single cell organisms started to diversify on the planet Earth. What was on the planet at that time before life started to diverse itself? You understand? He's about to get into that, right? He said, before you human beings were created in the physical form upon the planet Tiamat. And we talked about Tiamat. Tiamat was the fifth dimensional Earth. You understand? That fifth dimensional Earth was a high vibratorial frequency planet of fifth dimension, and it consists of mostly water, and you had your reptilian beings that were on the planet at that time. And there was a situation with Tiamat and Nibiru, or Marduk, crashing into each other and changing the whole dynamics of what we call Tiamat into what we see now, your three-dimensional Earth. So this is how the fall happened, because of the collusion that happened in space between Tiamat and Nibiru, or what they call Marduk, or Melchizedek. And when the Anunnakis was coming here, they crashed into the lost planet of what they call Maldek, which was an old reptilian planet. And when they crashed into that old reptilian planet, those reptilian beings came to Tiamat, which was the fifth dimension Earth. You understand? So when he talk about Tiamat, that's what he's talking about. Give me 1 minute, this thing is slow. It says, before the Precambrian period, before you human beings were created in the physical form upon the planet Tiamat, now called Earth, from the word Eridu, there existed supreme beings. So trillions of years ago, before the creation of the life form on this planet, before the Precambrian period or the Cambrian period, which were the period when the single cell organisms exist on the planet Earth, your amoeba, your parameciums, and those single cell organisms evolved into multicellular organisms, which are your metazoans. You went from your protozoans to your metazoans. Your protozoans were your single cell organisms. Your multicellular were your metazoans. You understand? Before that, on the planet Tiamat, which was the fifth dimensional planet Earth, which they all, when you get the word Eridu from, there existed supreme beings. So supreme beings existed on this planet trillions of years ago. These supreme beings that existed on the planet Earth trillions of years ago were star beings that came from other star constellations. You understand? They were what you call the Elohim, or the gods of your Bible, your Quran, your New Testament. You understand? It says the word earth coming from the word Eridu, right? Tiamat, fifth dimensional earth, right? Which is where you get the word Eridu. There existed supreme beings of pure green light, pure green etheric light. So these beings who were more advanced, who had an advanced light matrix of green light, they projected the green light. You understand? And these were supreme beings, supreme angelic beings, and these beings came from different star systems. These are the beings that you'll call the Anunnaki. You understand? Or the Elohim. These are the gods of the Bible. So trillions of years ago, before life was created in the waters of the planet Earth and started to diversify, you had these supreme beings who reflected the green light. You understand? The etheric green light. These were supreme angelic etheric green light beings that came from the stars. Right? It said you also had sub-supreme beings of the impure amber light, fire. So you had supreme beings of the green light, those angelic beings of the green light, right? And then you had sub-supreme beings of the impure amber light, which they call fire. So you had good angelic beings who reflected the green light, who were highly supreme advanced beings, and you also had sub-supreme beings. So when they say sub-supreme beings, that means that they weren't that supreme. They weren't that perfect. They weren't that complete. And they reflected the amber light, which they call fire, which was impure. So the green light was pure, and the amber light was impure, that these sub-supreme beings reflected, which they called the amber light, which was fire. It says you cannot fully comprehend their beginning because their time zone is much greater than your ability to comprehend at this point. Yet this very tablet which you are holding in your hand will open your eyes to their time zones that are in and beyond space. Right? It says these supreme beings called Anunnaki or Neteru, whose way of life was called Nuwapu, were endowed by El Kalun, the All, with a superior overstanding of 720 degrees in all, 360 degrees of spiritual or etheric state, the circle, and 360 degrees of the physical material state, the square. So we have the circle and the square. These supreme beings that they call the Anunnaki or the Natiru was what the Egyptians called them. The Sumerians called them the Anunnaki. And these beings were your advanced supreme beings that reflect the green light, which was the positive green light. You understand? And they had 360 degrees of material and spiritual knowledge. And you also had your sub-supreme beings who reflected the amber light, which was impure, which they call fire. So this is where you get your two angelic beings of good and evil. God, the devil. You understand? Those that followed the devil, Satan, those were the ones that reflected the impure light, which they call the amber light, or what they call fire. You understand? They were sub-supreme beings, meaning they weren't that supreme. You understand? That means they weren't that perfect. They weren't that complete. They weren't that advanced. They probably was more advanced than humans, but they weren't supreme beings. Like those that reflected the green amber, the green ethereal light, which was pure, which was positive. You understand? And those beings were the ones that had the knowledge of the material realm and the spiritual realm. Right? They had 360 degrees of spiritual or ethereal state and 360 degrees of physical material state. That's the circle. The spiritual realm deals with the circle. The physical realm deals with the square. Both 360 degrees, but they both have their own vibration and frequency. You understand? That's the reason why they look different. They both 360 degrees, but they dealing on different vibrations and frequencies and tones and sounds of energy. That's why a circle looks like a circle and a square looks like a square. The circle is more on a higher vibratory frequency because it deals with the ethereal realm or the etheric state. The square deals with the physical realm and it moves a little bit more slower. It says, glory to be the one appointed who is called in tones Anu. Right? And we talked about Anu. Anu is the God of the gods. He's the gods over all the gods, over all humans. You understand? Anu, this is where you get the word Anunnaki. Anu means heaven. That heaven is just another way of saying the galactical heavens, the sun, stars, and the moon, and galaxies, and solar systems, and all these different stars and planets and so forth. Anu was the ruler and controller over the universe. And then you have the suffix word Anunnaki. The word ki means earth. So those beings that reflected the green light, the positive green light, who were advanced supreme beings, they were appointed by Anu, who was the God over the gods, gods of gods. And he controlled the heavens, right? So let me give you a little bit about Anu, because Anu is the galactical father of the heavens, which is the galactical, the galaxy, the universe, the solar systems. He controls all that, and he's the gods of the gods. You understand? It says Anu means sky. So he's the sky. He symbolizes the sky, which symbolizes the heavens, which is the etheric realm, because you have 7 realms of the etheric realm of what we call heaven over our heads, which is that dome or that firmament that they call. That firmament is made up of 7 etheric gases. You understand? Which they call the sky. So it says Anu or Anunum, right, was the divine personification of the sky, king of the gods, and ancestor of many of the deities in ancient Mesopotamian religion. He was regarded as the source of both divine and human kingship. So the key word there is kingship. So Anu formed the kingship that came from the heavens down to earth. And people like Enki, Enlil, and Nehursag was part of the Anunnaki royal bloodline who came from the heavens. The sun, moon, and stars, the sky. The sky is the spiritual realm. And there's 7 levels of gases that make up that part of heaven, that makes up heaven, which we call a dome or we call a firmament. You understand? Which is over our heads. And you get those 7 layers of that dome, of that firmament. And that 7 symbolizes God. God symbolizes perfection or complete. And you have the 7 archangels. Those